Karen Miller wrote 13 fantasy novels between 2005 and 2014, as well as a couple of Stargate SG-1 licensed novels. As a huge fan of the prequel era of Star Wars, Miller was excited to write tie-in novels for the Clone Wars animated series. And the original plan was that Karen Traviss would write the novelization and books 3 and 5, and Miller would write books 2 and 4. Miller's first book was The Clone Wars Wild Space, but after Traviss dropped out of the project after completing No Prisoners, Miller ultimately wrote 3 out of the 5 books in the sequence. As far as I'm aware, Karen Miller hasn't published anything since 2014 because I believe that she suffers from continuing health issues that affects her ability to write. As with the novelization of the Clone Wars, I had never read Wild Space before. I had no idea what any of these books were about other than the novelization covered the events of the theatrical movie. I'm getting the sense, though, that instead of exact tie-ins that directly tie into specific episodes of the show, that once we get past the novelization, these are more just stories that take place within the world of the Clone Wars. There's an attempt to tie the events of Wild Space into 1/2 specific episodes, but that sort of goes away after this. So first, a brief summary. Obi-Wan Kenobi is wounded in a separatist bombing attack on Coruscant, so he's left behind when Anakin Skywalker and his Padawan Ahsoka Tano leave on a risky mission to track down General Grievous. And so he's in the right place at the right time when Senator Bail Organa comes to the Jedi about explosive intelligence about the Sith that could change the tide of the war in the Republic's favor. Obi-Wan agrees to accompany Bail to an obscure planet in the Outer Rim to verify the facts. But what Obi-Wan and Bail don't know is that they're headed straight to a trap set by Palpatine to annihilate them both. The plot of Wild Space is strangely episodic and sort of jumps all over the place. We open in the direct aftermath of the Battle of Geonosis, and so we see Obi-Wan and Anakin and Padme being taken to Coruscant. We see Yoda and Mace Windu conferring on the battlefield, and we see everyone being concerned about the attachment between Padme and Anakin, and Obi-Wan trying to warn her off. Then we jump ahead to some point recently after the events of the novelization and the Battle of Christophsis and the foiled kidnapping of Jabba the Hutt's Huttling. Obi-Wan receives word from Dex that he has information for the Jedi, and that information is that he knows where Grievous is going to be next. And as Obi-Wan is coming back to tell them this, there's a separatist bombing in Coruscant and he's grievously injured, but he still manages to tell Yoda what Dex said. And since Obi-Wan's so injured, they send Anakin and Ahsoka off to the Bothan homeworld to foil this attack from Grievous, because Grievous has been taking hyperlanes, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, Bail Organa receives word from these people calling themselves the Friends of the Republic about an evil Sith plot to destroy the Jedi. Bail contacts Padme, who contacts Obi-Wan. There's a fair bit of bickering and I don't trust you. Eventually it's decided that Obi-Wan and Bail will head to Zegula to find out more about this Sith plot. But first they stop at a space station in Wild Space, the title, to meet with Bail's informant. Unfortunately, there's pirates there attacking her people and she is killed, but not before she tells them a little bit of stuff. Not very helpful stuff, but a little bit of stuff. So then they head on to Zegula, but as soon as they land on Zegula, it's like filled with evil Sith vibes, and Obi-Wan is like ill and paranoid and weird, and they squabble and such, and eventually make their way to the Sith temple. And there's all these Sith artifacts in there and a Sith holocron, but they destroy everything. The temple falls down, and Obi-Wan uses a Sith crystal to communicate with the Jedi, who send Padme to go pick them up. The end. Basically, the whole plot here is supposed to take place while Anakin and Ahsoka are off in Season 1, Episode 6, episode Downfall of a Droid, where Anakin loses R2. I guess Miller was like, oh, Obi-Wan's not there. Let me make up a story about what Obi-Wan was doing. And the information that they have at the end of the novel directly leads into the following episode, Duel of the Droids, Episode 7, where Anakin gets R2 back. I have a lot to say about the plot here, but I think I'm going to save that for the issues section. What I will say is that I wish that the novelization of Attack of the Clones had included some of what was here in the first few chapters of Wild Space, because the novelization, like the movie, just sort of goes from Geonosis to begun this Clone War has, and Anakin and Padme are getting married, and that's it. And it was nice getting to see the after effects of that. The fact that Anakin lost his arm, the Jedi are still trying to figure out what's going on here, and yeah, relationship drama between Anakin and Padme and poor Obi-Wan as the third wheel. However, did it need to belong in this novel in Wild Space? More on that later. So let's dive into the characters. My first note about all the characters here is, why is everyone so angry and snappy and antagonistic towards each other? Anakin and Obi-Wan are yelling at each other in parts. Obi-Wan snapping at Padme, Padme snapping at Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan and Bail Organa are off on the wrong foot from the very beginning. And I was just like, why is everyone behaving like this? Miller's like, oh, Obi-Wan doesn't trust politicians. And I'm like, I'm sure he doesn't, but I'm not sure that he would have been so openly hostile to Bail Organa from the very beginning. It was just an odd choice for everyone to constantly be on edge with each other at all times. And I think that's part of what I struggled with in Wild Space, was just the tone of basically every single character here. That we have Yoda, who's like, attachment is bad. Sure, we've lost a lot of Jedi in Geonosis, but grieving is attachment, and that's bad. And while I do think that that's a big aspect of Yoda's character, that Yoda can't understand that human draw for connections between people that Obi-Wan and especially Anakin struggle with. But I'm not sure he would have been to this extent, especially right after such a tragic event. I just felt like everyone was turned up to 11, whether or not that made sense for their character. For instance, there were times that Padme felt to me like the Padme of Phantom Menace and the Padme that we occasionally saw in Attack of the Clones, where she's stubborn and she's independent and she's standing up for what she thinks. But there's other times where it just felt needlessly antagonistic towards anyone who disagreed with her. And also, the romantic scenes between Anakin and Padme were just... I am a person who often reads a Star Wars book and goes, I think it could use a little more romance. That's not the kind of romance I'm talking about. The few bits we had with Anakin and Padme, I was almost skipping ahead because I'm like, okay, what, yeah, you really love each other. Oh, this is cheesy. Anakin's hot off the handle about so many things. People not thinking he's ready to command a group of clones in a battle fleet against Grievous. That makes sense for Anakin. But then we have Obi-Wan also being rather spicy at times. Snapping at Bail, snapping at Padme, snapping at Anakin. I'm just not sure that Obi-Wan really would behave that way. And I think that Wild Space is meant to give us a story of why Bail and Obi-Wan trust each other so well, like why Obi-Wan trusts him so much that he would give Leia to Bail and his wife. I got the sense from Attack of the Clones that Bail, even before we get into the Clone Wars, even before we get into Revenge of the Sith, was one of the senators who support the Jedi, who like the Jedi. And I'm just not sure that this squabbling between the two of them makes sense for Bail's character either. When they're heading off to Zagula, they hear news that a battleship was lost that Breha Organa's cousin was serving on. And there's this extended thing where Bail wants to send her word that her cousin died, and Obi-Wan's like, you can't do that. No one must know what we're doing. And they're fighting about this, and all I can think is his wife's cousin died, and he just wants to let her know. And I could understand Obi-Wan's side of they're supposed to not be sending word out because no one's supposed to know what they're doing, but also, would Obi-Wan really not have any compassion at all for Bail's situation? Hi. And I feel like my dissatisfaction with the characterizations here also spills over into a larger issues issue, where it feels like the characters are behaving in this way solely to fuel drama. It doesn't matter whether it makes sense for their character as they've been previously established or not, that Karen Miller really wanted to write a book that's drama, drama, drama. And it almost has a fan fiction feel to it more than I would expect from a professionally published novel. Now, I am the first to say that I would not use fan fiction as a negative descriptor because I've read some really good fan fiction. I feel like fan fiction gives people an opportunity to delve into characters that were never fully developed in stories, or to take an alternate view of events. Basically, fan fiction is an outlet when the mother story itself doesn't provide what you're looking for. But there's a certain kind of fan fiction called hurt comfort, where a character will be injured and then another character will comfort them. And it can be a very cyclical cycle where that person is constantly just beat down so the other character can comfort them. And in a way, Wild Space felt like hurt comfort without the comfort. And the person being hurt here is Obi-Wan Kenobi. That when we see him in the first few chapters immediately after Geonosis, he won't even let the Jedi healers address his wounds, but until he finds out what's happening with Anakin. And then, of course, he's grievously injured in the Separatist bombing, so much so that he's not able to go on the mission with Anakin and Ahsoka, and he could have died. And while talking to Anakin, Obi-Wan lists just like everything that happened to him. And of course that culminates in Bail and Obi-Wan's time on Zagula, where we don't just have Obi-Wan being hurt physically, but also psychically and emotionally by the dark side, vibrations that are just yelling at him and screaming at him to hurt himself, to die. It just felt to me like Wild Space was Karen Miller's Obi-Wan Wooby hurt fan fiction. And it almost felt a little bit like looking into her psyche, and I'm not sure I wanted to look that deeply. And once we get on Zagula, the whole, the dark side constantly yelling at Obi-Wan to die, Jedi, die, and it's like he's beaten down. It almost felt like Karen Miller wanting to write her own version of Frodo and Sam trying to get to Mount Doom in Mordor, complete with the Sam carrying Frodo when Frodo can't walk anymore. And Although in this case, it's Bail carrying Obi-Wan when he can't walk anymore. I mean, we even have an illustration of it from the Essential Reader's Companion. It just felt a bit much. Like, I think that there's a way to show us Obi-Wan and Bail going through something that brought them closer together, that forged a bond that existed, all the way up to Bail sending his daughter to Obi-Wan when they need help with the Death Star plans. But I'm not sure that this was that story. And I did find once we got to Zagula, it was just so hard to read. Obi-Wan is just so absolutely smashed and brutalized and put through the ringer that I didn't enjoy reading it. And the whole time I'm wondering, what's the point of this? What's the point? Because they're going to Zagula for the Sith plan. Surely he's going to go through all this pain and suffering for a reason. But that's the thing. There's no point to this. I think that's the weirdly episodic nature of this book at play, is that, we have a couple chapters immediately after Geonosis, and that mainly just seems to be there to set up the premise of Jedi are against any attachment. And while I like, fleshing out what happened after the battle, I'm not sure that this was the right story for it. And then we jump ahead to the Separatist bombing and Anakin going off on the mission and then Bail getting the information and contacting. And you're like, okay, well, this will be like a really important mission, except, they go to the space station and Bail's informant dies because Dooku sent pirates to kill that group anyway. And then they go to Zagula, and you're like, okay, well, the Sith holocron, it has to be really important. Like, they have to take it back to... No, like, that's destroyed. All the Sith artifacts are destroyed. And so it all comes down to Palpatine was like, it will affect Anakin if I can kill his master, and Bail Organa's annoying, so I'll kill him too. Except it doesn't work. And the Jedi don't get anything out of it in the end, and just, that's it. So especially after suffering through the whole Zagula section, I'm just left wondering, what's the point? Like, why did I even read this? I liked some of the character insights, but on the whole, this accomplished nothing, and I didn't enjoy the experience. What? And I just have to get into, like, how absolutely weird the plot structure of this novel is. Especially because when you get down to it, the description that I gave for the brief summary is really the second half of the book. Let me break it down for you. Chapters 1 through 3 is the aftermath of the Battle of Geonosis. Then chapters 4 and 5 is Obi-Wan has heard from Dex that he has information. The Jedi tell him to go meet with Dex. He meets with Dex, and then he's there when the Coruscant bombing occurs and he's injured. We've got all the, oh no, Obi-Wan's injured. Oh no, what will we do with this information? Yeah, they don't decide to send Anakin to Bothaway to find Grievous until chapter 8. And then chapter 10 is when Bail gets the message from his informant about a Sith attack coming from Zagula. But Obi-Wan and Bail don't leave for Zagula until chapter 12, which also happens to be the chapter where Anakin tells Obi-Wan that he lost R2, which is the events of season 1, episode 6. Then we have 2 chapters of Obi-Wan and Bail traveling through space and bickering and not getting along. And at the end of chapter 14, Obi-Wan and Bail arrive at the space station in Wild Space to rendezvous with Bail's informant, who is a woman named Alinta. We have the fight on the space station against the pirates, Alinta dying, and Bail and Obi-Wan deciding to continue on to Zagula. And at the end of chapter 16, Obi-Wan and Bail crash on Zagula. And then we have interminable chapters of them trudging towards the Sith temple while Obi-Wan just completely falls apart. And it is not until chapter 21 that Obi-Wan and Bail arrive at the Sith temple. Then in chapter 22, Obi-Wan uses the Sith telepathic crystal to connect Yoda, and Yoda talks to Padme. And chapter 23 is Padme picks up Bail and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan sends Anakin and Ahsoka off to find the Separatist secret listening post, which leads into season 1, episode 7, Duel of the Droids. And that's it. That's the end of the book. There's no more chapters. So I feel like it's hard for me to recommend Wild Space unless you really want to read about Obi-Wan going through the ringer and Obi-Wan eventually becoming friendly with Bail Organa. When the plot is all over the place, the main plot does not start until halfway through the book, and Palpatine's plot completely fails. He's just like, oh well, would have been good if it succeeded, but and I'm like, dude, you just lost a Sith temple filled with Sith artifacts. That seems like a hefty price to pay for a maybe this will take out Obi-Wan and Bail plot, which didn't succeed. And then why did Bail and Obi-Wan go to Zagula to begin with? This accomplished nothing other than perhaps artificially forcing them closer together. I think why I'm so frustrated is because I don't think that Wild Space was inherently a bad book. I have read much worse Star Wars books. I think my frustration is the fact that why does it exist? Other than we gotta put out Clone Wars tie-in novels somehow. It's not badly written, but it's just overwrought and underplotted. So, in short, Wild Space by Karen Miller has an interesting beginning, but then I question why that was included in the book to begin with, other than to set up this idea of Jedi hate attachments, which we know. And it just felt like the main plot took a long time to get started. And then once it actually started, I was not crazy about it at all. I think I welcome the idea to read about Bail and Obi-Wan on a mission together, and I think I thought in my head this might be like a buddy cop story. It's not a buddy cop story. Obi-Wan goes through so much pain and suffering over the course of this book, and for what? For nothing. So if you want to read more about Bail Organa and Obi-Wan Kenobi working together, forming a connection, and then reenacting the trek through Mordor to Mount Doom in Return of the King with Obi-Wan in the Frodo role and Bail in the Sam role, maybe Wild Space is for you, but in my case, I'm glad I read it, but I don't think I'm gonna revisit. It's a no from me, dog. It's a no. So next time, I'm going to be reading the third book in the Coruscant Nights trilogy by Michael Reeves, Patterns of Force.